close your eyes, and breathe slowly. Imagine a gentle garden bathed in twilight, where Maya walks quietly, holding a cracked seashell and a fallen feather. With each step, her story unfolds, inviting you to a place of quiet reflection and deep relaxation. Maya had always been good at collecting broken things. As a child, she'd gather fallen bird feathers, cracked seashells, and wilted flowers, convinced that everything deserved a second chance. Her mother used to watch her from the kitchen window, shaking her head with a mixture of pride and worry.
"That girl has too big a heart for this world,"
she'd say to Maya's father, who would just smile and reply,
"Maybe the world needs bigger hearts."
Maya's father had been like her, a quiet man who worked at the community center, always staying late to help someone fill out forms or find resources. He never made much money, but their small house was always full of people who needed a meal, a kind word, or just a place to sit for a while. Maya learned by watching him that love wasn't just a feeling, it was an action you chose, over and over again. When her father passed away suddenly when Maya was 26, she felt like she'd inherited both his gift and his burden. Now, at 34, she found herself doing the same thing he had done, except the broken things had become people, and her small apartment had become their sanctuary. Her small apartment above the old bookstore was a haven for anyone who needed fixing. There was James, the war veteran who couldn't sleep without the TV on. Sarah, the single mother who cried every Tuesday when her ex-husband picked up their daughter. And Ben, the artist who hadn't painted in 2 years since his gallery rejected his life's work. They came to Maya's place every evening, drawn by the warm light spilling from her windows and the promise of her homemade soup. She never asked questions, never offered advice unless asked. She simply listened, stirred her pot, and made sure everyone had a warm bowl and a soft place to sit. There was also Elena, the elderly woman from downstairs whose children never visited, who would bring her knitting and sit quietly in the corner, just grateful not to be alone. And Marcus, the 17-year-old from next door whose single mother worked double shifts at the hospital. He'd do his homework at Maya's kitchen table while she cooked, sometimes staying late into the evening when the house next door felt too quiet and empty. Maya's apartment wasn't large, but somehow it always seemed to expand to fit whoever needed shelter. The mismatched furniture, the walls lined with books, the kitchen that always smelled like cinnamon and hope, it had become a place where people could exhale, maybe for the first time all day. But lately, Maya felt like she was drowning in other people's sadness. She would lie awake at night, staring at the ceiling, feeling the weight of every sob, every sigh, every story of heartbreak that had been shared at her dinner table. Her own dreams seemed to slip further away with each passing day. She'd once wanted to be a teacher, to travel, to write children's books. The manuscript she'd started 3 years ago sat untouched in her desk drawer, gathering dust along with her hopes. Maya had stopped buying books for herself because every penny went to groceries for her guests. She'd cancelled her gym membership, her art classes, even her monthly coffee dates with her college roommate.
"I'm too busy,"
had become her automatic response to any invitation that didn't involve helping someone else. The irony wasn't lost on her. In trying to help everyone heal, she had slowly broken herself. One particularly difficult evening, after everyone had gone home, Maya climbed onto her fire escape and looked up at the city sky. The stars were barely visible through the light pollution, just faint pinpricks struggling to shine through the orange glow.
"I don't know how much more I can give,"
she whispered to the darkness. The next morning, Maya made a decision that surprised even herself. She left a note on her door.
"Gone fishing for stars. Back soon. M."
She drove until the city disappeared behind her, until the road became gravel, then dirt, then nothing at all. She parked at the edge of a lake she'd never seen before and sat on a fallen log, watching the water catch and scatter sunlight like liquid diamonds. The lake was perfectly still, surrounded by pine trees that whispered secrets to the wind. Maya had found this place by accident or maybe by fate. She'd simply kept driving until she felt called to stop, following some inner compass she didn't know she still possessed. A small cabin sat on the far shore, smoke curling from its chimney. An elderly man was sitting on the dock, fishing line cast into the water. He waved when he saw her, a gesture so simple and kind that Maya almost started crying again. For the first time in months, Maya was completely alone with her own thoughts. At first, the silence felt strange, almost uncomfortable. She kept reaching for her phone, thinking she heard it buzzing with messages from people who needed her. Her mind raced with worry. What if James was having a panic attack? What if Sarah needed someone to talk to after another difficult call with her ex-husband? What if Marcus was sitting alone in that empty house, struggling with homework and feeling forgotten? The guilt was overwhelming. Maya found herself composing mental explanations, imagining the hurt in their voices when they discovered her absence. She had never just disappeared before, never put her own needs first so completely. Part of her wanted to pack up immediately and drive back to the city, back to her familiar role as everyone's safe harbor. But as the hours passed, something strange began to happen. The phantom phone buzzes stopped. Her breathing, which had been shallow and quick for months, began to slow and deepen. The constant knot in her shoulders started to loosen, muscle by muscle. She realized she had forgotten what her own thoughts sounded like when they weren't interrupted by someone else's crisis. When was the last time she had sat somewhere without planning her next act of service? When had she last noticed the way light moved across water, or felt the simple pleasure of warm sun on her face without simultaneously calculating who needed what from her? Slowly, the quiet settled into her bones like a warm bath, washing away the accumulated exhaustion of years spent as everyone else's emotional lifeline. She watched a family of ducks paddle across the lake. She listened to wind chimes made of reeds singing in the breeze. She felt her shoulders drop from their permanent position near her ears. As evening approached, Maya lay back on a blanket and watched the sky transform from blue to purple to black. And then, slowly, the stars emerged. Not just a few struggling pinpricks, but thousands upon thousands of brilliant lights, so bright and numerous that Maya gasped. The Milky Way stretched across the sky like a river of diamonds, and shooting stars traced silver lines through the darkness every few minutes.
Oh.
Maya breathed, tears streaming down her cheeks. She had forgotten how beautiful the world could be when you stopped long enough to really look at it. The tears came harder then, years of held-back exhaustion pouring out of her. But these weren't the tears of sadness she'd grown so accustomed to her own grief mixed with everyone else's pain. These were tears of recognition, of remembering something precious she thought she'd lost forever. She remembered being 8 years old, lying in the backyard with her father on summer nights, making up stories about the constellations.
That one there,
He'd say, pointing to a cluster of stars,
that's the Caring Heart constellation, but see how it's surrounded by all those other bright stars? That's because a caring heart can only shine when it's supported by a whole community of light.
Maya had forgotten that lesson somewhere along the way. She'd tried to be the only star in everyone else's darkness, burning herself out in the process. But lying there under that vast canopy of light, each star brilliant and distinct yet part of a magnificent whole, she finally understood what her father had been trying to teach her.
I'm sorry, Dad.
She whispered to the stars.
I'm sorry, I forgot that I was supposed to be just one light among many, not the only light for everyone.
A shooting star traced a silver line across the sky at that exact moment, and Maya laughed through her tears. It felt like a cosmic wink, a gentle reminder that the universe had been waiting patiently for her to remember this truth. She stayed there for 5 days. On the first day, she slept for 14 hours straight, waking only when the sun was high overhead. On the second day, she sat by the lake and wrote in a journal she'd brought but never expected to use. She wrote about her dreams, her fears, her small hopes that felt too selfish to voice. She wrote about her father, about the weight of trying to fill his shoes, about the guilt she felt for wanting her own life. On the third day, she took long walks, collecting smooth stones and interesting leaves, just like she used to do as a child. The elderly man from the cabin, who introduced himself as William, invited her to share his evening fire. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the flames dance, and Maya realized she hadn't felt this peaceful in years. On the fourth day, William taught her to fish.
Patience,
He said, casting his line with practiced ease.
the fish will come when they're ready, not when you want them to.
Maya understood he wasn't just talking about fish. On the fifth day, she wrote the first chapter of a new story, not the one sitting unfinished in her desk drawer, but something entirely different. A story about a woman who learned that loving others begins with loving yourself. When Maya finally returned to the city, she felt different. Lighter somehow, but also stronger. She had William's phone number in her pocket and a standing invitation to return to the lake whenever she needed to remember who she was beneath all the helping. Her friends were waiting, of course. They had worried, they said. They had needed her. James had barely slept without knowing she was there if he needed to talk. Sarah had cried herself through 2 panic attacks. Even Marcus had spent his evenings at the community center, looking lost. But something in Maya's face must have changed, because when she asked them all to sit down, they listened with a quality of attention she'd never received before.
I love you all.
Maya said, sitting in her familiar chair with her hands wrapped around a cup of tea.
I love that you trust me with your stories, your pain, your healing. But I've realized something important these past few days.
She paused, looking at each of their faces, James with his tired eyes, Sarah with her worry lines, Ben with his paint-stained fingers he claimed didn't work anymore.
I can't pour from an empty cup.
Maya continued.
And I've been running on empty for a long time. So from now on, things are going to be a little different.
She told them about her new plan. Soup nights would be twice a week instead of every night, Wednesdays and Sundays. She was going to take the teaching job she'd been offered at the elementary school down the street. She wanted to start writing again, and she'd rented a small desk at the local library where she could work undisturbed. And once a month, she would disappear for a long weekend, just for herself.
I'm also going to ask each of you to bring something to contribute.
Maya continued, watching their faces carefully.
Elena, maybe you could teach us all to knit. Marcus, you're brilliant at math, maybe you could tutor some of the younger kids in the building. James, you have so many stories from your travels. Sarah, you're the most organized person I know.
She paused, letting this sink in.
I want this to be a community, not just a place where you all come to take from me. We're going to take care of each other.
What if we need you?
Sarah asked, and Maya could hear the old fear creeping into her voice. Maya smiled gently.
Then you'll figure it out. Just like I had to figure out how to take care of myself. And you know what? I have faith that you will.
Some of her friends were upset at first. A few stopped coming altogether, unable to understand why Maya couldn't just keep giving indefinitely. There were harsh words, accusations of selfishness, threats that she would regret this decision when people really needed her. but the ones who stayed began to change. And slowly, Maya realized that those who had left were perhaps the ones who had needed to learn this lesson most of all, though they would have to learn it elsewhere, in their own time. James started volunteering at the animal shelter, finding purpose in caring for abandoned dogs. The nightmares didn't disappear, but they came less frequently now that he had something to get up for each morning. Sarah joined a support group for single mothers and discovered she had wisdom to offer others. She even started dating again, tentatively, carefully, but with hope. Ben picked up his paintbrush again, creating small, beautiful things that made him remember why he loved art in the first place. Elena became the neighborhood grandmother everyone wished they had, teaching knitting circles and offering advice with the gentle authority of someone who had lived through everything at least once. Marcus, with Maya's encouragement, applied for a scholarship program and discovered he had a gift for engineering. Most surprisingly, they all began to take care of Maya too. When she came home exhausted from her first week of teaching, she found a casserole from Sarah, flowers from Elena, and a small painting from Ben, a lake at sunset that looked remarkably like her refuge. And Maya kept every promise she had made to herself. She took the teaching job and fell in love with her students' curiosity, their endless questions, their ability to find wonder in the smallest things. She remembered what it felt like to have her own purpose, her own professional identity beyond being everyone's emotional caretaker. She wrote her children's book not about a girl who collected broken things, but about a woman who learned that taking care of herself was the first step to truly caring for others. When it was published 8 months later, she dedicated it to her father and to William, the fisherman who had taught her about patience. And every month, she drove back to that lake, lay under those stars, and remembered that she was part of something vast and beautiful. William had become a dear friend, their correspondence filling the spaces between visits with wisdom and gentle humor. On her last visit of the year, as snow began to dust the pine trees around the lake, William told her something that would stay with her forever.
You know,
He said, stirring the fire with a weathered stick,
I've been coming to this lake for 30 years, ever since my wife died. I used to think I came here to hide from the world, but I realized something recently. I actually came here to remember who I was, so I could go back and be that person for others.
Maya nodded, understanding completely.
The lake doesn't change us.
She said quietly.
It just helps us remember who we were before we forgot.
One evening, as autumn painted the world in shades of gold and red, Maya stood on her fire escape looking up at the city sky. The stars were still hard to see through the light pollution, but now Maya knew they were there. She knew that beyond the orange glow, the universe was spinning with countless points of light, each one burning bright and steady. Just like her. Maya had learned the most important lesson of all: you cannot truly help others shine until you remember how to be a star yourself. Inside her apartment, the soup was simmering, and she could hear her friends' voices, fewer now, but deeper somehow. They were talking about their dreams, their plans, the small brave steps they were taking toward healing. Maya smiled and climbed back through her window. She had work to do, stories to hear, and love to give. But now she knew the secret: the best gift she could offer the world was a Maya who was whole, rested, and shining with her own light. As she ladled soup into bowls, Maya caught her reflection in the kitchen window. For the first time in years, she looked like herself again. Not just a helper, not just a healer, but a complete person with her own constellation of dreams, hopes, and beautiful, broken pieces that had learned how to shine. Outside, the stars continued their ancient dance, invisible to most but eternally present, each one a reminder that sometimes the most radical act of love is learning how to take care of yourself first. Maya had finally remembered how to be her own constellation, not the only star in everyone else's sky, but a bright, steady light in a community of illumination. And in learning to shine for herself, she had quietly taught everyone around her that they too had their own light to offer the world.